These are 23rd.
What? Yes. Did you print out enough copies of that?
Yes.
Oh,
Everybody should have got one.
that's a good one.
Oh, yeah, you did that.
What?
Yep.
You better sign up to the Multnomah County Guest.
I did.
You did?
Yeah.
I got onto the.
So the copy of the media that was sent out previously.
Yeah, you, can you give a copy to Zach?
Yeah, Zach.
Thank you.
You bet.
All right, looks like everybody is seated. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for attending this evening's Town Center Advisory Board work session for February 2nd, 2023. Do we have a roll call?
All right, Vice Chair Stephenson,
Present?
I think Vice Chair.
That's what I thought.
Vice Chair
Not
Lemmy.
vice chair.
oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at an old version of this and
There you go.
I don't know why it says that on it. Okay, sorry about that. Committee Member Stephenson.
There we go. Present.
Regular old Joe.
Vice Chair Leamy.
Here.
Committee Member Diane Castillo-White.
Here.
Committee Member Zach Andrews.
Here.
Committee Member Carol Allen.
Here.
Committee Member Victoria Rizzo.
Here.
Committee Member Diana Robledo, not present. Committee Member Jeff Hutchinson.
Here.
Committee Chair Jordan Wittrin.
Present.
Committee Member Heidi Hinshaw, not present.
All right, thank you.
It's your volume.
It doesn't work there. And then who knows Karen?
There you
That was exciting. There we go.
That was exciting.
go. You've always got to ring in a Zoom call that way, so.
It's all good. So start off, probably turn it over to you, David.
Appreciate that.
All right.
Committee Member Allen, thank you for the introduction, the music. That was kind of cool, so I appreciate that. It was new agey, sort of electronic, sort of frightening, so it's good stuff. We think we have a pretty straightforward meeting this evening. You've received the questions. I do apologize for getting them to you so late. We've got a lot of stuff going on, and frankly, it's taken us a little bit of time to get them dialed into where they are at the moment. So, just kind of broad picture, these questions are what we're anticipating, sharing, and having the conversation with the 3 development teams on February 23rd. And what we're planning to do is we're going to send out, after this conversation this evening, we're going to send out probably a little bit of a revised version of this. So it'll have the presentation and vision questions, and it'll have the general conversation questions. It will not have the specific questions that we have for each team. And some of the things that are in italics might evolve a little bit between now and next week. The things in italics are just a little bit more detailed, so we're sharing that with you guys now. A lot of that stuff is still a work in progress. It's kind of like follow-up questions to the larger questions. But what we're really going through tonight is the larger questions. As we kind of prepare for the 23rd, we're also thinking a little bit differently about how we're going to do this. Abe Farkas is going to join us on the interviews. Abe's not with us tonight, but he'll be joining us on the interviews, actually, presenting questions to the developers. Both Alex, Matt, and Alex's team will be present, so they can be listening and hearing in, so we can all come back, reconvene, and have a thoughtful conversation. But we just thought Abe, given his experience in working on these public-private partnerships, was useful to have at the meeting. So he's going to be there. Marley's going to be running the clock and managing all of us. She's, trying to think of the right analogy. She's trying trying to think of a good football one. So she'd be like the Andy Reid, you know, for Super Bowl. Like she's going to be managing the clock, managing the players, you know, sending me to the bench. What's that?
I'm a Chiefs fan. So
She's a
that's
Chiefs
fine.
fan, so that's all going to work. So that's what
Go
she's going to be. That's what she's going to be doing. And then when we get to the, assuming we choose a team, Matt Brown's going to help us on that, working at the exclusive negotiating agreement. So tonight, what we're going to do is just kind of go through the questions. You know, we don't have any fancy way to do this for you, so we might just read through it and just see what you think. I'm going to hand it off to Marley to sort of talk about the first set of questions and kind of the thinking behind that, and you know, we'll go from there. As we're doing this, please jump in, ask questions, comments. You have myself and Matt and Alex here, and so just jump in. But this is what we're thinking of moving forward with for the 23rd. Hi.
Hi,
Welcome.
thanks.
So Molly?
You're gonna add to the record?
Yes, I'm gonna just let the public know and for the record that Heidi is now present and attending this evening's work session.
All right. So the interviews are planned to be 90 minutes long. And a lot of times in these interviews, there's an opportunity to do a presentation in the beginning. And so the idea is that the first 20 minutes of the interview will be spent in a presentation format where they're getting to show us more visuals or expand upon some of their vision questions. And so this section of the interview is really vision specific, and what we've done is ask them to identify their team and their roles and who would act as the project manager, so who would we be interacting with on a day-to-day basis, and then briefly describe their vision for the site and incorporate these questions that we have into what they're presenting to us. And we have a lot of points that we want them to make with that, so I'm just going to read through them and stop me if you have any questions or comments. But
Let me just jump in with one quick comment, which is it is intended for them to embellish on what they presented, but the questions are also intended for us to get information that we're still seeking. So we're not really, we've seen the first round of your dog and pony show. Now we want you to kind of respond to some of the things that we've been thinking about. Still do it in a cohesive, coherent, thoughtful, hopefully an exciting way based upon the questions that Marley's going to walk through.
So we want them to expand upon the on this being a creative, a vibrant and welcoming place for locals and visitors to enjoy. So we really want them to describe specific types of public or publicly accessible spaces that they've presented. We've had a lot of questions about the waterfront and how does the trail interact with their uses and the public spaces that we see on these site plans. So we want them to expand upon that more, specifically focusing on those commercial areas that are adjacent to the waterfront trail that we've all had lingering questions about. So that's a big one to highlight. Building off of that, the ground floor of the buildings fronting the river is an important design element to get right. Given that it's, its proximity to the park and trails, and those are publicly accessed. How do you propose making this edge inviting for visitors and users, as well as residents? Describe your design approach to ground level uses and features that create that welcoming feel for users of the park and trails. So at our last meeting, we talked a lot about the interaction between those spaces. So we really want them to spend a good amount of time talking about the design choices that they're proposing to make in those areas. So next we talk about, we get into apartment design. So while we acknowledge the likely need for mostly surface parking, there is sensitivity in our community to the building of low-cost apartments that have really generic cookie-cutter designs, like a lot of the woody walk-up style apartments. Describe your design approach to achieve high-quality development. How does your proposal differentiate from conventional suburban garden-style apartments, including the physical and site design amenities? So we were really asking them to expand upon what they mean by multifamily housing and what could we, if we were to select them as a developer, what could we expect them to build multifamily-wise? What can we expect that to look like? And what sort of amenities can we expect to see? which I think is really important because we've spent a lot of time talking about that. Next, we want them to share and describe a development timeline for the project, which highlights at a minimum the following milestones, starting with the project award and continuing through the completion of the first phase of development. So really just getting a more detailed information on their proposed timeline and how they see the negotiation process in all these back-end things occurring, and when do they want to start constructing, and et cetera. And then following that is describe the scope and scale of your first anticipated phase. So this sort of builds off of that. If we're expecting them to build the site in phases, what uses would they do first? What are they prioritizing? How much of the site would be developed in that first phase, et cetera. And then finally, do you anticipate the first phase having a positive residual land value? And are you prepared to speculate on a price? And that's one of the more technical questions that came from Matt, Abe, and Alex to include in that. Are there any questions on this section of it?
Okay. First question is, when will they receive these questions? When do they get an opportunity to look at this?
Monday,
And then the interviews,
so long as we all,
and the interviews start when?
on the 23rd.
Okay. I was wondering if, like, at the very beginning, if we include language, I don't know if we're all in agreement with, like, something that will also give them direction as to expectations. So if they get this in advance, they might also have another opportunity to take this into consideration for what we're kind of hoping and wishing for. So my words like, at the beginning, talk about a Northwest feel focused on the natural features and creating a special place to enjoy the Sandy River. The reason I'm thinking of that is I'm thinking of all the places that really matter to me and that are special. And if they're just kind of thinking, okay, we're gonna put this in here, it's like, okay, where's the wow factor? Where's the, you all of a sudden enter into this zone where you're going, oh my God, look at the Sandy and look at the Columbia and look at the beginning of the gorge type of feel. So I'm not sure if we don't express that might be a really good thing to have there. So that was just a thought on that one. Then later on, when it's talking about high quality development, I was reflecting and remembering a lot of things that the Urban Renewal Committee, is that what the councilors are called? Agency. We're talking about, and I don't know if, like, right now we're looking at something with tons of apartments, and we're not specifying whether the low income, high income. There was an expectation of home ownership, but I'm not sure if, like, the work that we do, by the time it gets to the councilors and they're saying, hey, we said we didn't want apartments, and now all of a sudden Woods is proposing all these apartments, and I don't know if they're the ones also that propose a hotel that didn't make it as a hotel, and possibly would be apartments as well. I didn't know if there was they did mention high quality development. We were saying that we are deficient in upper income housing. I don't know if there was an opportunity, and I'm not sure if this is appropriate here or where, but again, if we're not explaining the expectation, I don't want them to have to do extra work if there's some things that we could include in language without dictating to them, because of course they're going to present what they think it can pan out and will work and what their desires are. Do you kind of see where I'm going with that?
Yes, are you wanting to ask them whether they would be constructing market rate apartments versus affordable apartments, or do you want it to expand upon that even further to?
Well, I'm just saying the council's talked about home ownership, they talked about executive housing, they talked about great office space, and so something to kind of help lead them in that direction, because we're saying there's a sensitivity in our community to low cost apartments. They're going, oh, well, we can have tons of apartments as long as they look like upper end apartments. Because I'm still, in my mind, I looked at Amazon again, the turnover rate, I'm hoping we're not creating this space for that type of income level, just because we're almost sufficient in the low income and we're still building apartments. And we do have a closed space, so we, you know, they're welcome when we do have that. But this, we're needing some additional income. The outlet's suffering. We need our downtown to make it. That's why Capstone even, it looked like they valued, which I really appreciate that bridge, that connected the two together. Because when I did go to downtown Vancouver today, the waterfront, I was like, I go, oh my gosh. I go, the waterfront had like life and lights and a lot of activity. And then I drove into the downtown. I go, oopsie, there wasn't people in their bars. Do you know what I mean? And stuff like that. And that just hit me, like how important it is to have that connection and then have uniqueness like carried through in that, the connectivity and such. So anyway, those are just my comments.
So then to kind of go off of Diane's comments, it sounds like to give them guidance of what the community is looking for. None of what Diane just said is not, it's already been repeated of what we said in earlier. We already have in notes, tons of notes that David and I gave to the URA. I just wonder if there's a way to give the developers a very high look at our notes of very pointed strategic notes from those notes, very high level, to say, these are some of our concerns or some of our guidance of what we think collectively as a committee, and present it with the questions to give them, to make sure they're going down the correct path of what we want to see, so that they're not going down a rabbit hole that has nothing, that has no bearing. If we're giving all the developers the same information.
Right.
I don't know if that's right, wrong, I don't know, but.
I'll take a stab at it and I'll ask Alex and Matt to jump in too, and Marley. I appreciate the comment. Diane, yeah, I think it makes sense. What I'm asking myself is, how far do we want to go?
But
Because, and that's where I'm just sort of struggling a little bit. I think, you know, some notion of mentioning the mountains and the river could be a very good idea. I see Matt shaking his head. And so, but on the other side of the coin, my gosh, if you didn't come in and talk about that, I'd be kind of disappointed. So, and you know, if you follow my thinking, like if you don't come in and really talk and understand our site, it's going to count against you. So right now we have the wood partner scheme, and it's pretty much a math equation at this point. I wouldn't really call it a design. It's a math equation. We would hope that they come back with a little bit more than just their math equation. I think we can lead them along a little bit more. I think some of the ideas are good. I just know that there's a little bit of for me, a little bit of a concern about over-directing them and then frankly getting ourselves in a situation where maybe they deliver on all the stuff that we want, but then the market can't produce it. So that's a little bit my take. Matt, you want to jump in?
I think there's a fine line where if you spoon feed them too much, they'll orient their presentation over what they think you want to hear and not really tell you what they think. Right, which is really what you're trying to do, is differentiate between the different teams of like, how are they approaching this? Like, what do they really think is possible here? Like, do I see a difference in the way they're approaching this? So I agree with David. I think like giving them that upfront thing, like, hey, remember, like this is a special site, and this is kind of like what we were, you know, it's almost like inspiration but not direction. Versus something that is more directional, like pointing them towards a specific mix of housing, you know, that you think you want to see. There's been a lot of discussion about it here. These guys should be doing their homework, coming back, looking at the notes, reviewing the video sessions, and understanding where you guys are at. I personally don't think you should be spoon feeding. Alex, what do you think?
I agree.
Alex might have more or less to say. Alex is, I don't know, is struggling with a little bit of COVID, so that's why he's not with us tonight and a little bit under the weather.
Thank you for not sharing.
Yeah. You know, the thing is too, Diane, is that once we select and we get to once we know more, like we're gonna get back together and maybe they'll hit the mark. Maybe they'll do all the things that you want them to do because they're smart and they did their homework and they read the reports. If they didn't, that's something that we could take into the ENA and say, look, you're here, there's a reason why you're here, but there is certain elements that you need to respond to. And your response might be, this doesn't work. You know, it might be, okay, and then we'll take that back to leadership. But that might be another place to do it. So I'm just trying to find the fine line personally, like Matt said.
Yeah.
So I think weaving in a little bit more flowery language about the site, I think that's pretty important. In terms of the housing, I think we could do a little bit more. I'm a little bit hesitant to jump into too much detail. If you look at the more site-specific questions, which we'll get to in a minute, at the very end, we ask Wood about apartments. I mean, we're not shying away from that. We're just not sure that we want to put it in this introduction section. So
Okay.
we can keep.
Yeah, I'm just so I'm clear, I also am concerned with developers' money as well. You know what I mean? They do plans, they do whatever, so I'm sensitive to that. If they know, you know, what's important to us, and hopefully it's important to them and they have some vision as well. But like I said, also the high-end homes, because also I've looked up Amazon again, and they're expecting to be fully automated in 10 years. All the reports that I'm looking at, that's 10 years. And you're newer, but I remember, like I've said this so many times, that Metro told us a long time ago that we'd be providing some housing, and Gresham would be providing housing and we'd be providing jobs. That was their forecast way back when. And they came and Metro came and then they explained this to us. It was multiple people that did that because that was their long-term projection. So I'm just hoping that we are focusing on missing the high-end housing, because where are we going to put that in Troutdale? That's where we're deficient. We're like 1% from the low-income housing, and I still appreciate affordable housing, but we're still doing apartments along Halsey and other places as well. We're such a small community. We get to enjoy all the amenities and all the views that Troutdale does have to offer.
Yeah, I have 2 quick points on that. I think that one of our questions that's later is, what's your public engagement strategy and why is your team best suited to engage the community? And I'm really curious to see what everyone says in response to that, because I think a lot of these design choices that they'll be making, they might not have made them now, but they're hopefully going to use like this committee and public meetings to create some of those design choices. And so I'm hoping that they'll have an answer that says meeting with you all and whatnot. And then the other thing I was going to say is that it's an interesting point about mentioning the high-end housing, just because a lot of these developers do work in Portland, and Portland is so geared towards building affordable housing that if we were to pose a question that said, what type of housing are you going to build, they might be having to respond to, like, say, affordable housing to meet the requirements that Portland has, that maybe we do be upfront with saying, you know, we are expecting a higher end multifamily housing option.
I think too, and I think when we'll incorporate some notions of the site, you know, 2 things. The site's wonderful, right? So, I mean, there is something that I think strongly suggests that you want to have a full range of housing types, right? I don't think it would make sense to do, you know, all affordable housing or all rental housing. I think when they put those things in their presentations, I think it's because they believe, and we did see it, right? I mean, obviously Wood went more extreme, but we saw this kind of mix, and I think that mix sort of reflects what they think about the site. I mean, they need this thing to pencil and all this type of stuff too, so they want to, I think, I think there's an opportunity to get a little bit more returned if there's that kind of balance of housing types. But let us think about maybe if there's a way to weave that in. a little bit more, but I would like to weave in more kind of setting the table about the site. Does that sort of work for everybody? Does that seem okay?
Go ahead.
I was gonna say a couple things. I mean, if we wanted to, we could reference page 142 out of the town center plan that talks about what the expectations are for that site. And one of the bullet points, residential development should prioritize home ownership opportunities. Another one, which I'm sure they'll read, is the HNA. It says that there is a shortage of 600 and change units on the lower income side, and there's a shortage of 1,100 and some odd units on the higher income side. So if they're looking at a document like that, they would probably be pushing towards market rate or higher to do that. The other thing too is if there's an expectation for lower income, they're also going to be probably making an assumption that the city is going to subsidize that.
Well, I mean, one of the things I hope this whole exercise clarifies is them making assumptions. And that's kind of one of the reasons why Abe has joined us on the interview committee, is to kind of provide some reality, if you will, to some of those assumptions. There's a lot that needs to happen for this project to work, I mean, from a financial perspective. And, you know, I'm not a developer, but the market's a little challenging at the moment. So I think we need to just be careful to be able to balance a vision that's in the town center plan. And again, it's not my decision. Council will ultimately make the decision about do they like who's selected, and they'll make the decision about how the ENA is going. But there needs to be a balance between what's happening or what's dictated in the town center plan, what's in the RFQ, and what are the conversations that come out of ENA. Because, you know, it is possible we could go through the ENA process and sort of say, and throw our hands up and say, we don't know. And that's, you know, that's not going to be my decision. I'll just be, you know, the vehicle for communicating to you and to council, here's where we're at. So,
And it's, I mean, there's always a possibility that when it's all said and done, everybody just has to step back.
what do you mean by that?
You know what I mean? Maybe at the end of the day, it just doesn't fit,
Oh, absolutely.
you know, and we just all have to be prepared for that.
Yeah, we don't know that for sure, but that's a conversation that we've had. We, the team, don't know. There's a lot of pieces, which is why I'm so thankful to have, you know, Dave, Alex, and Matt as part of our team, because they really do provide a little bit more real world expertise in terms of how these projects go down. We don't know.
But how many $1 million is the city in the hole right now?
What do you mean?
For
What's
the
your definition of in the hole?
Well, just based on what they've already expended on the remediation of the property.
Well, the urban renewal agency's in the hole, yes. I wouldn't say the city's in the hole
Fair
at this
point.
time.
Yep, they're different.
Okay, ready
Should
to
we
move on?
keep going? Okay,
Yep.
so I think then we come to the next section, and you'll see in the next section, it's 40 minutes. The reason for that is we're assuming that once we, almost to this conversation, when we get through the 20-minute introduction, those of us on the interview committee might have questions. So we wanted to allocate more time to sort of say, you know, Jordan, Canny, whatever you want to bring up at that time based upon what you see in the design, give us a little bit more time. So then it's really 30 minutes, if you will, to look at the conversation of questions. These are questions that we're planning to ask each of the three teams. And we just wanted to kind of identify who we think at the moment might be giving those questions. So, you know, Jordan, you're getting the first one, as we're proceeding it. I'm taking on the second one. The mayor's doing the third, Abe's doing the fourth, and Tanny, you're doing the last question. So we all ask a question, and then I'm going to go through that in a minute, and then we come back, and then you'll see the specific questions that are going to be sent out can't remember, we're sending out the specific questions individually to each team to prepare,
We are
right?
sending out the specific questions that are relevant to the team in
Right.
question.
So Ethos will see,
Yes.
yeah, so you're seeing what we're gonna ask them, but we're gonna break it up into 3 teams. So, the first question, thinking Jordan might ask is, what are the challenges that you see in developing the site and implementing that vision? So, I mean, that's another opportunity to talk about, again, if they're doing their homework, what they see is their plan versus the town center plan. We can even come back that actually might be a great second question that we can say. They can go, and maybe why don't we think about that as a second question? Whatever they come up, we can say, well, how do you think whatever you came up with jives with the town center plan? That might be a way to get at it conversationally, if that makes sense to you. Okay, so and then what role do you see the city playing, right? Because we are a partner in this. So then I take on the long-winded one, which is, given the current state of the market, how has the current state of the market influenced your development program? And do you see changes in the next 1 to 3 years that would make you adjust your thinking or approach? And then I take a pause and say, for ownership housing component, we have 2 questions for you. First, will you be building ownership housing, or will you be creating parcels to sell to home builders? That's kind of question that we haven't quite had this conversation, but it's important to know. You get a sense of like how much they're in, right? Not that a home builder can't do it, but they have a tendency of doing it a certain way. So if they say, no, we're shepherding this from A to B, it might give us a little bit more confidence about how they do the work. The second question related is, how does the current interest rate environment impact the ownership housing market? Are those conditions likely to change in the near future? So again, we're not shying away from the ownership. We're just sort of asking, what do you guys think based upon the market? So that's a general question. And again, everybody would be welcome to add on to that. And then I would go on and talk about the commercial component. And I would say, has your thinking on the amount and type of retail that could be successful changed, right? Because we've had these proposals for 2 months, and we just want to get their latest and greatest thinking, and then the final question is about uses. So we talked about breweries, we talked about maker spaces. What else do you think? And so I would be leading that question. Again, the rest of the team members could jump in. So that would be question 2. Then the mayor would jump in and ask the next question. Can you describe the hotel component in a bit more detail? Who's the primary market, and which market segment do you think is appropriate for this site? And then talk about the various hotel types. At what point in the development process do you see the hotel being built, right? That's a pretty important question. That could be at least a source of income on the early in the project. So those are where those questions came. I hope you guys are seeing a balance where we're trying to balance design ideas with market ideas and trying to get the thing to move, and we'll see how they respond. And the next question would be, come from Abe Farkas, because frankly, this has been his question, but would you be willing to consider a long-term ground lease as opposed to property sale? So, that might, and I think if you don't mind, Matt, can you talk a little bit more to that about the pros and cons? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I'll put you on the spot.
Well, I mean, I think as it relates to the city's financial position on this, I mean, there's some triggers for repayment of some of the debt that the city has related to the urban renewal area, the city and external bondholders. And so there are some, as well as, for instance, there's some state loans and everything else that have gone into the cleanup of the site. So the question is, short of actually transferring the property, which would trigger the repayment of some of these, perhaps if there's a lease arrangement, it might provide some more flexibility to the city and kind of handling the financial obligations on the site. So, the question is there some flexibility in the way that you could see like developing the property in terms of how the land is owned? Typically, like with a ground lease structure, you think about it, just, they'd be paying rent to the city, come up with some agreed amount that they would pay on a, pick your period, monthly, quarterly, annual basis, based on what the value of the land is. And that becomes, again, a cash flow item. again, that could be anywhere from $1 to, something else, right? It all becomes part of the negotiation. But the idea there is to try to create a little bit of flexibility for the city in terms of how they could dispose of the property and what it means for some of their external obligations.
Because it also provides flexibility to the developer, so if he or she is not put in a position where they have to purchase the site, that they might have more opportunities to do the things that we think is important, or we know that the infrastructure is such a heavy lift that might be easier for us to negotiate as part of the ENA. I mean, does it give us a little bit more flexibility that way, do you think?
Maybe, I mean, I think, the primary ground leases aren't necessarily easy or preferred for developers, because even if you have a 99-year ground lease, the question is always like, is this going to impact my exit value? Because I'm not really selling the land, right? I'm only selling the improvements on the land. So, it's not a no-brainer from their perspective to say yes. I think from the city's perspective, I'm not entirely clear about how, what are some of the other benefits. I don't know, Alex, do you have any other thoughts on how a ground lease structure might benefit the city?
I mean, I think as opposed to a one-time valuation of property with the residual land value analysis,
Yeah,
this could be escalating over time and thus would eventually have positive value in theory. So, and it also reduces upfront costs. So acknowledging everything that you've said about, the comfort level that the development community would have to have with such an arrangement. At the end of the day, 100 years from now, the city still owns the land, right? So it could be a multi-generational opportunity to, 100 years from now, people sitting in the same room or a room where we're all levitating somehow, to be having a similar conversation. So it preserves some generational opportunity for the city to shape the site on a really, really long-term basis. But it also, as a more practical matter, it could provide meaningful revenue to the city, but probably not for some time. Delayed gratification strategy.
that's right.
And I would just add that you can look this up, Abe showed it to me the other day. I think the lease for Guinness is, you guys might know this, 6,000 years? I think it's something, so anyway, I'm not suggesting we do that, but it just wanted to share that.
It's an option.
It's an option. If we want to lease it for 6,000 years, we can do that, so. And then the final question we have here was hoping Tanny would take on, which is talking about the public engagement strategy. So that's kind of the meat of the presentation, the thing that everybody is going to address, if that makes sense to everybody. We can take a, does that work? That makes sense? Commissioner Castillo-White, makes sense? Yeah, I mean, I just want to make sure everybody's comfortable with it.
Yeah, I might not have enough expertise to comment on it, but I'm not seeing anything that I have a question on.
Okay. And hopefully the process makes sense. It gives everybody an opportunity to speak. And then so we go on to the last piece, and we do have specific questions for these guys. And this is kind of based on the conversations that we've had. So I think at the moment we're imagining, and this can evolve a little bit, largely, again, not everybody participating, but, set it up that it was staff, and I think we asked Jordan and Randy to jump in on some, actually, we asked in Tanny too. But the questions were to Ethos, town center plan calls for direct access through the Outland Mall. Your proposal shows a pedestrian-only connection. Why is a complete street not proposed, and would you be willing to consider a complete street? I think that's something we talked about to exhaustion, right? And then is utilizing only the existing vehicular access on 257th Way sufficient to achieve the vision you have proposed? Said another way, do we really think it's a great entryway into the neighborhood when you have to come into the outlet mall loop around it to get into the neighborhood? Do you have any other ideas about how to do this? And then Abe would sort of ask the question, describe the relationship between time equities and ethos for the project. We don't know. We'd like to have a better understanding. How long have you guys been working together? What is your relationship? So we know what we've kind of heard through the grapevine, that they're hand in hand and there's no negotiation. We really don't believe that, but we want them to talk about it a little bit more. So those are the questions we had for ethos, and I could take a moment here, or I can just keep rolling.
Keep going.
Okay. Questions to Capstone, and thinking Jordan might lead this question. Your proposal anticipates a direct vehicular access through the outlet mall owned by Time Equities. What happens if you're unable to negotiate direct access? And so that's really the brunt of it. And if you were going to do this, how would it change the design and mix of uses? Is there again, we keep asking, is there an alternative proposal that you could imagine bringing people into the site? And I think what we're really kind of trying to get at, big lift, but is there some type of interchange related improvement that there's another way to come in off 257 as opposed to linking into the mall? Is there another way to come in sooner? That would probably entail working with ODOT. It's probably a huge lift, but we want to ask the question just to get their thinking, because there's a little bit of coming through the back door. Then again, the way this is always structured is when it gets more down to the deal type questions, we're having Abe sort of lead that. So how do you approach working with Time Equities? This is Capstone. How do you approach doing that? Have you worked with an adjacent owner previously to achieve an important goal? What was the outcome? And the mayor we'd ask the mayor to jump in, and can you describe in a bit more detail the types of units and tenants you see occupying the light industrial buildings in your proposal, as well as the design approach to these structures? So again, trying to talk about the commercial uses that can support not only the Confluence site and the downtown, and also hopefully at a high level, talk a little bit about design, right? I don't think anybody's going to volunteer that they're going to do tilt-up buildings, but hopefully they're going to volunteer that they can do something maker space, different types of work environments that could be exciting for the area and for various employers. And the next set of questions is for Wood. And so your proposed design utilizes indirect existing access, kind of flipping it a little bit. Did you consider working with the outlet mall to create an access through the mall and redesign your proposal around essential access? How would this access change your approach to the design and development on the site, right? I think it's the thing we all want to know. If you guys have access, would you given us maybe something a little bit different? Would you anticipate a different mix of uses with direct access? Specifically, would some of the apartment uses likely switch to retail or other employment uses? And then, is utilizing only the existing vehicular access on 257, this is a question we're asking everybody, sufficient to achieve the vision you have proposed? If so, how? So we do really want to understand from a design point of view how you're entering the site and what does it mean to create a community. Abe would jump in, again, you can see this gets a little bit redundant, but then Abe would jump in and ask about the relationship with Time Equities. Have you worked with adjacent owner previously to achieve an important goal? What was that outcome? So looking for that partnership or experience in partnerships. And then as we have it set up now, Tanny would bring us home by sort of saying, your development program is centered primarily on market rate apartments with some ownership townhouses included. Is there a reason that more commercial uses were not incorporated? Tanny, we can change that a little bit, but it's hopefully getting at the question a lot of you have been asking. How much is your development program impacted by the existing features of the site, like site access, infrastructure, et cetera? So that's what we got, and then we give them 10 minutes to ask us questions, and that's 90 minutes. And that's what we're kind of thinking.
So I'm sure there's going to be questions that in our minds get spurred on from the answers that we are received.
Yep.
Are we going to try to ask those follow-up questions at the time we're thinking of them? Or are we going to recap at the end with these folks? What does the process look like to you
That's a good question. We haven't really talked about that internally. I would say that if you have a question, you ask it. I mean, I would ask you to be cognizant, though, that we want them to get through all this stuff. And I'm not sure how to do that. I mean, Marley and I could talk a little bit more about how to manage that. I don't know if you have any ideas.
Well, I was just gonna say, we did talk briefly this afternoon about the presentation section, holding questions until the
that's a good
end of
point.
that, so that we're not interjecting in the next slide could have the answer to the question that we're thinking of. So if you have questions during that, keeping them until the end. And then I would say, just if you're one of the people on the interview panel with questions, knowing the other questions that are in the list so that we're not duplicating any question, like if they could answer that question with possibly one of these other ones, not trying to repeat that. But yeah, I would say at the end.
I guess what I'm saying is that at this part, before we go into this questions for the city, we have a little pause and go, is there any other questions before we flip the script?
Sure.
Yeah, I think that we could probably do that.
I guess that's what I'm asking.
I think we can do that at the end of that.
Yeah,
at
any
the end of
other-
the conversation.
No, I think what we would do is do it at the end of the 40-minute. So the 20 minutes, they do their thing, then the next 10 minutes is for us to ask questions or have a little bit more dialogue. But when we get to the end of that 40-minute section, I think you're right, we can plug in or make a space where other committee members can ask additional questions. I will say that there's questions that we're still working on as a team that are a little bit more technically oriented, to the deal, if you will. So again, to Marley's point, some of these things, if it's technical things that you're thinking, Jordan, those might get answered. We just haven't had a chance to totally flesh them out.
I'm
yet.
more thinking that they give very small, short, close-ended questions that I wasn't happy, and I want you to expand a little bit more.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can create a space for that after.
Who knows, maybe all the answers are gonna be perfect and, we're gonna get our answers. I don't know, maybe. Doubt it, but maybe.
We can fill a little time into that.
Let's circle back on your comment earlier about the housing. Because as we were going through this, I was thinking that perhaps one thing we didn't really hit on here specifically, which I think is getting a little bit of what you were saying, was just like simply asking them, like, how did you arrive at the residential mix, right, that you proposed here? Like, we've asked questions about ownership and everything else, but it's like they obviously have some idea. How did you get there? Like, describe it. Like, they're either going to tell us, well, yeah, we looked at the housing needs analysis, or, well, we've done some market studies on our own out here, and this is kind of what they told us, or we think that this site has these characteristics, and therefore it's well suited for this type of use. But just having some insight maybe into their thinking behind what they're proposing on the housing side, I think would be helpful. Besides just like diving right into like ownership and stuff like that, which those questions are good, but I think we forgot to ask maybe the larger question, like, how did you get here? So.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I'm looking up at Alex and also looking at Marley. I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
You might want to, in fact, I could definitely see adding it, but maybe some of the other questions are maybe too specific. I mean, but I like the way you asked the question. How did you get at your mix?
Right.
Your housing mix seems like to be the real question here.
How'd you get to your mix? What are the market opportunities that you see for housing here?
Yeah, I wrote that down to add it in the beginning, because I think that's a good first question in the residential. So maybe instead of saying for the ownership housing component, maybe we just say for the housing component, and then have those 3 questions, so just add that one in.
Does that start to get at some of what you're talking about?
Well, you'll understand why they came up with what, but the thing might be that they are going, okay, you're Multnomah County, and maybe we were anticipating that you are wanting us to deliver on. Do you see what I'm saying? So there's that part, or if there's that, we're giving kind of an expectation. That's kind of where I was coming from, saying,
Right.
okay, the counselor's just saying this, you're gonna do a lot of work. You were maybe flexible, but now you're gonna have to rechange it if you're not submitting it to the satisfaction of the agency. Did you see what I'm saying? So I was kind of looking at everybody, but I get what you're saying is seeing where they came up, what's their philosophy, what were their thoughts, what was their vision, or.
And I think they may be able to press, like, the interviewees may be able to press them on, like, follow-up questions like, so how flexible are you? And that's
It's
like,
going back to your statement earlier, Matt,
Yeah.
if they group Troutdale into all of Multnomah County, they haven't done their homework to put together a good presentation or done their due diligence, right?
that's
So,
that's right.
I don't know how you wanna do this. Can I ask about two questions?
yeah, this is
to
just
add
a
to
work
this?
session, so this is pretty casual, so.
Okay, okay.
Go right ahead.
First, what is a tilt-up building?
Oh, I mean, I was just imagining, like a traditional kind of warehouse where you literally pour the form on the ground and then they put it up and they have, like, it's not very attractive.
Amazon was.
It's an industrial building, right?
Okay,
I mean,
so is that your idea, or are you thinking of something else?
We just want them to be able to hopefully talk a little bit about their vision, right? Because when you're thinking about breweries and makerspace and some of the things that Capstone described, they can be really interesting buildings. Not super expensive to build comparatively, but just kind of interesting and something where, it helps to kind of foster the identity of the community. Maybe a bad example, but like Tillamook cheese, right? It's kind of it has sort of an, I don't know, industrial is the right word, but they're making stuff, but the building itself is pretty cool. So, or even the stuff that you imagine, I think of like in Hood River.
Yeah.
Is that where you're going? Yeah, the stuff along the waterfront in Hood River where Freedom Brewing is and Ferment Brewing, like those are interesting buildings. Maybe somebody will say that, like, hey, we're thinking about Hood River. Check the box, that's pretty cool. So that was a thought.
Okay. I know that we mentioned it in the RFP, and I know that it was one of the goals in the initial town center meeting. And I know that all three of the applicants addressed green building, but I just want to check in with the group and see if do we want to emphasize that in our question, like, I've been thinking a lot about stormwater management and how that gets integrated into this in a creative way, because it's part of the park, it's part of everything. Is there a way we could ask something about that?
I think we had initially had a question about that in there, and I think that David and I took it out
Okay.
because we were like, well, those are public improvements, so we'd be able to be involved in that process anyways.
Okay.
And so it was like, since it's the public property, we have more, I don't know, I think that we
It's in the
like,
code.
not even that it's necessarily codified to look a specific way, but we figured since it will be a public improvement that is publicly owned in the end, like, that we would have more say over it. Do you remember?
Well,
you had a
one
question
of the
about
things
it,
we
and
did
took it out.
today is when you and I were talking, we were talking about, in the general questions, you said, describe your design approach to high quality development. And that, when we're thinking about development, we're not just thinking about buildings, we're also thinking about what happens in the public realm. So maybe we can just add that. So like including,
Creative infrastructure.
Exactly. Well, I think creative infrastructure.
I do remember there's a question.
I would
and
want
now
to
I'm
be
like,
careful,
did I
again,
delete
I'd
this?
want to be careful though, because that's such a type of thing where buzzwords, right? People run with it.
Right,
So,
right.
but I do think we could put something in there, maybe talking about creative infrastructure.
I want green building to be integrated in the whole thing.
Right.
I want them to be thinking
And I
about
know
that.
you and I, Dave, talked a little bit about green and that the standard here in the Northwest is so high. It's just the standard to be green, right?
Yeah, I mean, none of the buildings, at least I can speak very confidently that are residential, they're all gonna build to, LEED bronze, LEED silver. Like our codes just get you to that no matter what. So to say built, so if we were doing this 10 years ago, we'd say, can you build to LEED?
But now we're above that.
We're above that. So I think it's for me, I'm sorry for interrupting, I think it's a full-on site development strategy.
Right, that's
And
more
that's,
what
and Marley and I could try to flesh that out a little bit more.
okay. And if it's like between two and one wants to elevate and like really reach for the stars, I think that's worth something.
Agreed.
Which applicant mentioned that if the hotel did not work, that it would become apartments as well, which I can't recall who's that.
I thought that was Ethos, wasn't it?
Ethos,
Ethos, I think.
but there's another one that was, I
No,
think
Wood.
there was something in
think it was-
Capstone that, hold on.
Okay,
I thought it was wood.
the reason is if we're really
They're already apartments.
wanting a hotel, and then it's like having this thought that anybody can change anything at any time into any lower, I'm not saying lower, I don't even know what's right, you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Is there a way to phrase if we, because I think the council also valued it, but if we valued highly a boutique hotel or a form of mini convention center or hotel, you know, whatever that might look like, is there a way to ask them that question, or would they be, I don't even know how to ask it. I just basically want the hotel to remain a hotel, even if they have to just hold off for 10 years for the economy to pick up, or for tourism to pick up, or for whatever, if they have that option. Because otherwise, if they're going members and they're going, well, we're gonna make the most money doing this at apartments anyway, they can create any type of justification at any time. And then who are we to say no? I would like the opportunity to upfront say, this is an expectation, and this is just my personal comment at this time. Do you get what I'm saying with that? That I was uncomfortable with the opportunity to change at any time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Kenny.
Ethos has got a couple of disclaimers in there, one being that pending a market study, the hotel could be turned into another multi-family project, and also two, the commercial could be turned into residential.
See, when I hear that, they're gonna do a market study, right? They have to. And so if they're thinking that some form of residential might be a higher and better use at this time, I think there's value to that. That doesn't mean that if part of the ENA, we can't also talk about the value of a hotel. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I think there's a way, I think there's a way to keep the hotel in the mix. If they come back after the market study and say, like, this is really what we can build today. So I'm not sure, now I feel like I'm not answering your question, because your question was really more, feels like it's more concerned about converting a certain building from hotel to residential.
Yes, because other than that, what the city could do is, if we were in a hotel, we have this land set aside, and go, this is just for hotel. Are you wanting to be part of that if we choose you? Do you see what I'm saying?
I do see that.
Yeah, and you know, there's ways we could get where we want to get. Because I know how people who judge what things are valued, you can come at it all sorts of different angles.
Right.
Okay, so they can make justification for anything they want. Anybody can make a justification at a later time, market-wise or whatever, with analysis gathering, whatever. It's lawyer talk. You can make a case for anything. You just can't.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a hard one, because I'm trying to figure out like whether it's appropriate to talk about now or later, right? Because it's, for me, this in part, this is I think that the best way for the city to approach this, if the hotel is really, really important, we'll pick any use, right? Any use down there, it's really important to us. Create this site plan, we think that the hotel goes here, but the market study in year one, phase one, says it's not ready. You know, the city should have the power to be able to say, hold that, right? Let's wait on this. We're gonna agree, part of our agreement with you developers, that that site doesn't just get converted to residential because in year one, it doesn't pencil, right? We're gonna save that as an opportunity. There may be some point, like 10 years down the road, you're like, okay, we all give up, right? If no one can get a hotel finance on the site, maybe that's really telling us something after 10 years. But, I think the city can really control the timing, control of that parcel, right, for what gets delivered. Right now, it seems to me all three teams are saying they're on board with the hotel, right? And so I think if you structure it properly, you maintain that opportunity, right, into the future. And, we asked them specifically in here about what do you envision for the hotel, like what kind, and, what do you think the market is for that right now? So I think we get a sense from them as well as to
Do you think,
how soon that opportunity is coming.
But,
sorry, no, go ahead, George.
but at the end of the day, it's who's ever negotiating for the city, whatever's important to city council, who's ever doing the ENA. No. Who's ever prioritizing and negotiating all this out is going, it might be important to Diane, it might be important to me, it might be important to Tanny, but at the end of the day, if it's not important to city council, who's ever doing the negotiating has to understand, right? In the ENA, right?
Yeah, yes.
Yes. We could ask it now. We could say, the city, assuming the city is going to identify a site for a hotel. Can you describe the hotel component? So we could add that to the front of that sentence if we wanted to. That's one choice. That's one way to think about it. Another way to think about it might be thinking about, before we walk into ENA, is to have some type of session with leadership that says, these are the 10 points that those of us who are part of that discussion are champions of, or something like that. I don't know if that would warrant going to the city manager, go to council. It would definitely be something that I'd be sharing with the city manager, and the city manager has, weekly talks with the mayor. But we would prepare a list and say, okay, here's our 10. These are the things we're going in with, and hotel might be one of the 10. Does that make sense? I'm just thinking process, so to not lose your thought.
There's too many times, I think, because we all share on committees, is we have a voice, and then we want to make sure the voice gets heard.
Heard that
Stand it
before.
out. Tanny.
So a couple of things. They've obviously done like some almost basic market study, right? Or they wouldn't be to this point. You wouldn't just submit a proposal, would you? Without really looking at it? Yeah, you're gonna go into more depth.
Yeah, it's probably pretty cursory, so, I really can't, I guess if I were approaching this, they're all experienced commercial and residential developers, right? So they all have a lot of experience in those realms. And so as such, I think they have a pretty good handle on those markets. Like, probably I would maybe narrow it down to East County, right? Maybe not necessarily Troutdale or specifically this area, but certainly East County. They understand it very well. When it comes to something like a hotel, I think that's probably more of at a cursory level. Freeway access, visibility,
Right.
Destinations nearby. Yeah, we think that probably makes sense, but they probably haven't done much more analysis beyond that.
And is it just being honest, or is it kind of hedging your bet? Because it's like, well, if this doesn't work, we'll just put up another 5-story building.
Yeah, no, they're definitely hedging their bet right now, right? I think they know that people would like to see a hotel here. And so they want to make sure that's part of their program. But at the same time, they're saying, well, why would you tie up a couple acres of this property if there's no chance of ever getting it financed? There may be some other directions you want to take that. And I think it's up to the city. I think my point was, it's up to the city to define what's a reasonable time frame, right, to hold on to that parcel, that opportunity, if it's really important, so.
So if there is a land transaction, are we then looking at possibly like deed restrictions or something to make sure that the vision's kind of carried out? Because you do a land transaction and it gets sold to somebody else, then you could have a completely different vision.
I think we could incorporate that into the ENA conversation, but to Matt's point, you wouldn't want to have that perpetuity. You want to have some type of limit on it. So you're just, being respectful of the market. I mean,
I think that, and I think a couple of the teams have already approached it this way, if I'm reading their proposals correctly. But I think they're envisioning, like, we know that the property is gonna have to be subdivided, right? So there's gonna be a number of parcels created down there.
Oh, do we know that?
So I assume that there's going to be a parcel that is earmarked for a hotel. And, that subdivision can happen before the property is transferred, right? That subdivision can happen while the agency still owns the property, right? So the city can retain ownership of that without going into deed restrictions or anything else. Just retain ownership of the parcel, right? Until the financing is proven out and you can actually know that you're going to get a hotel built, or until the city decides there's not really an opportunity here and we're going to go in another direction. So there's a couple, you could do deed restrictions, you can hold on to the property, there's a few different strategies you could do to preserve that opportunity.
Yeah, it's just, I'm not saying it would happen, but you
Yeah.
have an election and Curly, Moe, and Larry get on the council, and all of a sudden you're going a whole different direction with things.
Been down that road, it happens, absolutely.
Really. I've seen it where it's like, well, that was those guys in 2022, they don't know what they were talking about, now we're going left.
I've had it happen in the course of 3 months on one of my projects, so it's.
Sorry.
Carol, did you have a question?
I think it's been covered, but I still want to stress, and I know, Dave, you're probably hearing me, is we have a voice, and I really want the city manager and the city to realize that we have a voice, and that we have these committees because they want to hear us and hear our opinions. And when they go to the table, I want them to consider what we've all talked about, and not just come up with anything from the left and leave them at the right.
I think that one of the things that would be helpful, and I remember mentioning this at the first meeting that we had, is coming up with some sort of a ranking of priorities. Like if hotel is the most important thing, then that would rank number one, or if the the ownership housing is not, like, so that whoever is negotiating sort of knows rank out for TCAB and have an understanding of that when they're sitting there in the room weighing, well, do we give them this for this, or do we wait because we want this other thing more? So I think that would be a really helpful exercise for us to do once we get out of these interviews. And like, that can be the first thing that we work on, is sitting down and coming up with this ranking so that who is in the negotiating table can have those conversations and know, okay, this is what TCAB said is the most important thing to them. Now I know I'm gonna hold out for that. And then to the hotel turning into apartments question, there's two proposals that propose it. It's Capstone and Ethos. Ethos only has one hotel, and it says option to become multifamily pending market study. I remember having this question earlier, and so I wrote it down. Maybe this is a question specific to Ethos, is have they done their market study in the time since this has been submitted? And how, like, if it says that right now hotel isn't good, how long would they be willing to wait to build it? So asking them some more specific questions about that. Capstone, on the other hand, has two hotels proposed, and the boutique hotel, which is the one closer to downtown, is the one that is the option to be 59 apartments. So I think we could ask them similar questions about, what conditions are they looking for to make that happen? How long would you be willing to wait to see that outcome? Because if they put it on paper now, but then, day 30 rolls around and they're like, okay, it's been long enough apartments it is, then it's obviously what we're looking for.
Go ahead, Jim.
I know this has to work for them, but I also would believe that they want to know what we want, and they want to build something that the community is going to support.
from a practical standpoint.
Yeah.
They don't want to end up fighting,
Right.
the community and all the, I mean, there's legal avenues, right, that the community can take to slow things down, which is terrible. So, David and I were just whispering about, we have this question here about the public engagement, right? And I think it's a really important question, kind of getting at what you're saying. And I guess in my ideal world, what happens is that you select a developer and that team is going to commit to a really kind of robust public engagement plan, right? I mean, there's a lot of work to do on planning on the side and really kind of developing all that. And that should include a good public engagement process as they go along there. And that's where, you really need to be able to influence the outcome of the plan. Ultimately, that plan then gets to council, right? So if everything goes the way I think it should, right? That plan reflects what they've heard when it goes to council, and you're there supporting it along with a developer. That's an ideal version of what happens, right? So I'm not sure how we get at that in this. I mean, we are asking them about, like, what's your public engagement process and how do you plan on doing that? But it's a really critical part of the process.
I think, during the exclusive negotiating agreement, can we write in there that, they have to have public hearings, I don't know that we want to dictate a certain number of them necessarily, but like, stages of the process come back to this committee,
I think,
or what's the best way to do that?
I mean,
Something like that, but probably too detailed for right this second, but something along those lines, right? Something to engage a committee of some sort, or TCAB probably, but yeah.
I think that's what we did, Jordan, with Imagination Station. Once we chose finally the company that we worked with, we had several meetings of how we wanted it to really look.
Wood or metal?
I think that, I'm sorry. I was gonna just think about that question that Tanny's talking about, Matt was talking about. What's your public engagement strategy and how's your team best suited to engage the community? I think that can be maybe tweaked a little bit, to talk about the value of the partnership, the public-private partnership. So what do you think, have them talk about that? Because I don't have a great feeling for the process. I mean, I do have a pretty good feeling for how this community is, and this community, one of the mantras you always hear about is transparency, and what you hear a lot is about this public partnership. So to get through the ENA, I think there was been a lot of different times thrown out. Wasn't it like 6 months to a year? There was different, we did imagine that it could take a year to get through this process. Is that correct? I mean, as we're sitting here, it feels like a year to me. Like if somebody comes in and says, no, I don't mean, I'm sitting down. No. I was wondering, you guys are laughing. But I mean, just in terms of like creating a partnership, it's gonna take some work. So why don't we add that in about talking about the value of the partnership and add that to your question, Tanny. It will get fine-tuned, to Marley's point, I think, in the ENA, right? If they're coming back and we're gonna bang this thing out in 2 weeks, we'll be like, I don't think so, not in this community. Yeah. And by the way, they're not gonna do that, right? Because they're all experienced developers. They all do know East County. They're not gonna do that, but it will be curious to see, the detail that they do go into to build that connection. And I think we have feelings now just based upon the written materials of who we think is a good person to partner with.
Yeah, yes.
I just want to talk about the hotels again, the importance to me of them. And the benefits to either, let's say, for now, as proposals are proposed, Ethos and Capstone are the strongest at this moment. For Capstone to have both hotels, it would be beneficial to Time Equity's property, because, like I said, when I did the Portland Saturday Market for 10 years, our biggest customers were the convention centers. Our products were always new to them. And that was shopping opportunities, which would be great for downtown Troutdale. The food's new to them, the shopping experiences and all that, but it's also a benefit to the outlet, for shopping, because that goes along with being a tourist. And then if it was vice versa, ethos, then again, that gives them more sales as well, a mixed use of sales. And then again, it helps downtown Troutdale. So for those two, it's a benefit. It's a benefit to community, keep our stores open for us, the residents that live here, and to give them sales at the waterfront and also at the outlet. Because before, when I was also talking about ice cream, like, hey, we were talking beer, we're talking coffee, what about the ice cream? Well, guess what? The chocolate factory in the outlet, when I was there the other day, they have ice cream. I think it might be Alpen, it's a good variety, and then they have candies and chocolates. So there's the partnership, it's like, okay, well, you have something for the kids here too. They have the outlets, they have the opening through the center, then it's gonna be a continued partnership regardless of who does, who gets it. So anyway, it's just a plus to highlight to have the hotels.
Makes sense.
Thank you.
Yes.
I have one more question that I thought we could all consider asking. In terms of efficiency of the development process, I would be very curious to know what each of the three teams' philosophies are on collaborating with subcontractors and did any of them specifically call out if they're design build companies?
No, and I would say that they aren't, but,
So they're designers, not builders.
they've all got different architects with them. But to that point, though, Ethos has already identified Bremick as their contractor.
So the Bremick would be the builder who would have their own subs. So anyway, I think my impression is that projects go a lot better if there's a lot of communication up front and then strong collaboration with subcontractors. So if they responded well to that question, that would mean something to me.
Matt?
My sense is that that's usually a general contractor issue,
Not a developer.
and not a developer issue.
Okay.
The developer gets involved if you start doing things like saying, we're gonna require certain, MWSB, like subcontracting rules, or we want you to develop some apprenticeship programs. I don't think this project rises to like a level where you want to consider that, but it is always something that you could consider as part of that. But developers usually relying on the general contractor to bring those relationships.
Operationally, that's really hard to do too.
Yeah.
What?
Subs.
Yeah, what are you saying? To organize like select subs. I mean,
Yeah.
they've all worked with their teams, and I think what we need to base our assessment on, which we've done, is that, are they experienced teams? Have they built? And they all have.
And that's kind of what I was getting
Yeah,
at.
they
is
all
like,
have.
what's your experience with that? Do you value partnership? Do you have long-term relationships?
They all have, and what'll happen is, they might have their go-to infrastructure person. That might be the same on every firm. Typically in transportation, there's like you see the same firm on 10 different teams. So they're all going to go to the folks that provide them the best service, to the conversation that we've been having all along, right? Because they want to deliver something as easy and as profitable as possible. Profits related to being, the process isn't too arduous. We can work with their partners and work with the city and work with all of you. So I wouldn't sweat that part too much.
There's one location where I think that we could maybe kind of ask that question, and it may be a different way, but in the beginning presentation, we asked them to identify who would act as the project manager. Maybe we could say, like, can we anticipate this project manager would be following this through to all the way to certificate of occupancies, or would there be a different project manager that would come in the building phase, and suddenly we're working with a whole different person who wasn't involved in this planning phase, and like, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Just seeing, having gone through building permit processes, and the project manager is super important in this. So maybe that's something that we could figure out a way to really quickly just say, like, would they be working with us on this every step of the way?
And how would you manage your transition if there has to be one? Yes.
We can consider it and
Yeah.
try to finesse it.
Zach?
Yeah, I'm sure. I know I spent a lot of time listening tonight, and agree with a lot of the team. One of my biggest things was also environmentally sustainable design. After talking with David about that before, like the standards being so high and stuff, I'm not super concerned given their experience and the work that they've done in the past. From what I've seen, it does seem like it's going to be like a pretty integral part of the plan. I would imagine that would be the case. I guess the one thing that I have on here that still remains unanswered at this point or untouched on might just be on the first section for the vision specifics when we're talking about making this edge inviting for visitors and users. I guess an image that keeps coming up, and I think I mentioned it last time, just going back to what Diane was talking about first, and like emphasizing a unique space, and again with it balancing, not spoon feeding them ideas necessarily, but maybe planting a seed on, not necessarily specifying when it's saying describe your design approach to ground level uses, but maybe just throwing in one other word in there as well, like ground level uses and rooftop uses, or something just to emphasize like here along that space than just along the edge, than just, you know, the apartments or whatever you're gonna put above it, but like really maximize kind of that space and make it a unique place that you know, everyone can enjoy. That was, I think, the main thing I had. That's the
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Lemmy, do you have anything?
The only thing I've been reading through these, I'm wondering, can they tweak their plans after reading these questions? I know there's.
I think so.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know.
I'm reading the questions, I'm thinking there's at least one. Oh, for sure. I was gonna have to.
There's many ways to do it, right? I mean, you could come in with, depending on who's your team, with a lot of kind of freehand diagrams supported by pictures. That's not a huge lift. If they're gonna try to bring it back all into CAD or into Revit or to one of the modeling tools, that's a larger lift, but only a few of the teams kind of did that anyway. They created a simple model and then kind of with the technology through to Matt's point, there's ways to do it. I mean, it's kind of really what we're looking for too. If they came in with the same thing, given that we gave them the questions, that would be disappointing. Thank you.
Right.
I was trying to think of the word.
Yeah.
Or if maybe after the interview, they just take all their stuff and
Leave.
you never know, you know?
Yep.
Jack, your comment was also, but just make sure I got it right, was about understanding not only the ground floor, but the opportunities at the top of the building.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like,
Maximizing-
yeah,
Yeah.
just views and stuff like that. It's an interesting thought. Okay.
Mr. Hutchinson?
Yeah, I'm pretty comfortable with where we're at tonight, and I think that after we go past this first phase of the interviews, I think when we come back, we're gonna have a lot to talk about. So I think this is kind of like going through with a broad comb, and then after we get the first interview behind us, then we go to the fine tooth. So I think it'll be interesting to see the responses, for sure.
Mr. Stepson?
So our process will be coming back to this team.
Process is that hopefully everybody will sit in on the interviews, right? I mean, some of us will be participating, but we're all gonna be there listening to the best of our ability and our schedules. And then we're gonna come back and sort of have that conversation. So what do you think? And then we're gonna pull out the rankings that we did a few weeks ago and sort of see, do they align? And, we'll go from there. And then once we do that, staff will put together a staff report, a presentation, something to council saying, here's how we ranked it. We're not saying, choose this guy. We're saying, like, through our analysis, this is where they kind of landed. What do you want to do? Talking to Ray, my sense is that meeting would happen as more of a kickoff and some explanation. And we'd probably have at least another meeting afterwards to dig into more of the detail with council. So there's quite a bit of process still to go, even before we get into the E&A.
But our URA meeting is when? March 20-something? That's fine.
Yeah, March.
And then are
Yes.
the interviews, because I was kind of like, okay, I'd take a second when I saw that the interviews were during the day or morning of, and like, I got to take off work to physically be there. But are they going to be recorded so that if people
Yes.
on the committee can't?
Assuming they are, yes, right?
Yeah,
Right.
so that was the next
They'll be
thing I was gonna
recorded
say, is that
and-
if
and they'll
you
be on.
can't attend during it, we will record them. And I'll email them to you guys, or I'll put them in a Dropbox. Is that
You
okay?
guys okay? I mean, really, I should,
I don't think we're
you
gonna
guys
put them
okay
on the
doing it?
website, but,
You gonna video them?
yeah,
Keith going to?
yeah. Oh, no, not, we'll have them on the Zoom recording,
Okay.
but not the Metro East.
Okay.
But I don't know that, I guess the question is, I don't think we're gonna put those interviews on the website necessarily, because they're not public hearings, so we don't.
I wouldn't, yeah,
Public meeting. But you don't have to put that on, yeah.
So I'm guessing, I'm just wondering, should I email them to all of you guys, or put it on the website?
Or a Dropbox with a.
Or, yeah, that's what I.
Yeah, you draw, you're right.
Yeah, so I'm sure Dropbox would be fine.
and are you guys okay? I mean, I think we've been running around so much.
I cleared my schedule for that time.
Tanya, you're okay?
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, thank you.
23rd. And the time, since we're discussing it, I can tell you the exact times for each of them. If that's helpful to everyone.
One minor tweak to your questions. There's a couple places in here where you reference light industrial. There isn't any light industrial down there.
Okay, take that out.
I think we chose that word just because the breweries, like a lot of them have proposed breweries, which would be considered a light industrial use.
Air conditioning. Yes.
What's this they sell? Can't read. What's purple?
That map's wrong. That's the old zoning map.
We ordered a new box of crayons, they just haven't come in yet.
Yeah, it's the MU3 zoning district is the zoning.
Our new zone.
district.
Marley, the interview is gonna be held in this room,
Yes,
and what was the date again?
February 23rd. The first interview is with Ethos and Time Equities at 9:30 a.m. So it'll go from 9:30 to 11. The second one is with Wood Partners from noon to 1:30. And then the third one is with Capstone from 2 to 3:30.
It's a long day.
So that's
Better
on
bring
February
snacks.
23rd.
February 23rd, yes.
And can we come in person or just Zoom?
Let me get back to you on that. I think you could, the problem is, I think you can come in person. Let me think about that.
And we'll be sitting in the chairs back here,
Yeah.
correct? This will be for the interviewers and,
Exactly.
okay.
It's hard to do an aura read through Zoom. I can't feel their energy. Do you know what I'm saying?
Oh, good point.
It's like when you see their eye, I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
it's like person, it's just really,
Terrible.
it's real, well, no, it's just different. It's just, hey, we're wanting to do business with you all, and they're really wanting to be in Troutdale, and it's nice to look at them.
Can't tell
That's
you
why
how
I moved
many
across the
percent.
country for my interview.
What's that?
See,
And I
yes.
have the developers here and the interviewers here so that you can stare them down.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That's how it should be, the interviewers, they should be up here. And the panel should be here. And then people can be behind and everyone can see it.
Okay,
I was just making my way around.
Put us here.
I'll let you go, Karen.
just confirming, so there's not a meeting that night, it's just the interview during the day.
Correct. If you can't make that,
I cannot make it, I teach. there's no
yes,
way.
that's fine. It'll all be recorded. So we will send you the recordings afterwards so that you can listen. I'll try to send it out to you guys on the 24th so that you can spend the weekend
Oh, boy.
doing that if that's what you want to do. I mean, I just know that it's tough when you get home from work to continue working, so.
And
You
then
have
we
trouble
meet,
sleeping, hit play.
and then we need
No,
to
that's-
discuss
That's
all
the
that.
screen.
Yes.
March 2nd,
This is
right,
the-
at our,
It's a Thursday, right?
This is what's here.
March 9th.
Playing the night before.
Yes,
Yes.
March 9th is then our next meeting to discuss.
Think about that.
And then the URA
You're all
meeting,
right.
when is the URA meeting?
Victoria, what do you have for the team? You good?
A question about the hotels, and can we sort of specify we don't want the low-end hotels?
Well, you got that market already.
Yeah, we got Motel 6.
Huh? Well, I'm only saying that because you all know all the trouble of our low-end hotel.
So everyone has different definitions, so maybe help me.
Motel
understand.
6,
Motel 6.
Super 8.
But Hampton Inn, Residence Inn,
Those are all, yeah.
you
Those are-
consider those to
Those
be,
are probably, okay.
yeah. We'll see what they say about the hotel market and everything else, because we're asking them about that. But my sense is that if the hotel is located closer to the freeway, it's going to be more of a limited service, oriented towards the highway traveler, and so Courtyard by Marriott,
Well, our Motel 6
something
is
like
right
that.
off the
But,
freeway.
and yes, I don't think that any of these teams are thinking along those lines, but we'll definitely hear what they're thinking.
Is that something they would sell off?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, because Patel owns the other two.
Mhm.
You might be interested in it.
Wood Partners proposal says that they would sell,
Yeah, that's
they would
what
create
they
another
were-
parcel and sell it off to.
What's selling off, yeah, that's what I thought,
Yeah.
Woods was selling off the property to go to hotel.
I think he might be interested.
And I think when we ask the questions about hotels, sort of having them expand upon, I think there's a question there that says, would you be the one developing, or would you
Yeah.
have someone else develop the hotel for you? Because I do think that's important, because they've all mentioned the hotel, but some of them are kind of vague on, well, is it you, or is it someone else? How are we involved in that relationship if it is someone else? So to that point, yeah, I think that's.
At that point, why would
But can,
the city just hold on to that parcel and work with the hotel developer?
so
Yeah,
Raj
to make it another
owns the
parcel,
one,
yes.
the one over here behind Dairy Queen. But he also owns Best Western. In Wood Village. So that's two different price bands.
Two different markets.
And then different Patel owns Travel Lodge, which is a lower,
Continue to go around the
lower
seller.
level.
Are we-
You're all good?
I'm good.
Cynthia?
Okay,
Back to you, David?
that's it.
Carol, I mean
Did I
Diane.
start-
didn't
I didn't start with
get to say
Diane?
I don't think you said, no, you started with
You're
Diane.
good? Okay. I'm sorry, I apologize. Back to you, David.
I think we got everything that we need. We're gonna take some of your comments, fold them in. Again, there's more kind of questions that we're still developing as sort of follow-up questions that we'll get out to the interview folks before the date, but for next week, we'll get this out to the developers, so they'll have those two first sections and then the section that's applicable to them, and we'll do this thing and see what happens.
Is there a way to talk to other jurisdictions that have dealt with these companies?
The answer is yes, and we probably do that as part of the due diligence period when we get to that point.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you almost, I guess I was hesitating, you almost hope that they would be kind of alluding, like, present examples.
References?
Yeah, we'll definitely be doing that, but again, we know these folks.
Yeah,
So there's-
Even the people from Becky's?
Well, so no, I don't think any of us really know time equities. Well, that's gonna be a very interesting conversation, right? So the first question with them is, to me, the first question is, are you really willing to play ball?
Yeah.
Second question is, what if the team has changed a little bit? Are you still interested? It will be interesting. They are, as I'm learning, a huge developer investment company. Hopefully we'll get a better understanding for their commitment to this place. So
They're gonna be here, right?
that's our
They will be
understanding,
there-
yes.
They will be on Zoom.
Oh, okay.
They're not gonna physically be here.
Do they really exist?
Ethos will be here. Time Equities came back and said that they are going to participate via Zoom.
And David, you've worked with Woods.
Yes, I've worked with Wood, Capstone, and who's the other one? I'm trying to blank now.
Ethos.
I've worked with Ethos, excuse me, yeah, Wood and Capstone for sure. Yep.
Okay.
And all the architects,
That's good to know. That's good.
and they're all,
Is our meeting on the 9th at 7?
Yes.
Alex,
Unless
did you have
guys
anything
want
else for us?
to-
This is all good. Matt, you're good?
Yep.
Okay. We're good?
we're good.
We'll take a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
1 second.
Got a motion, got a second to adjourn tonight. All in favor?
Bye.
Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you.
Take a ton of notes, or
Did you ever find out?
Took enough.
you wanna try to think this one?
Yeah, she said it
I don't
was
think
due
we
to
want- I think
scheduling
we should go
conflict. She
back
couldn't get it
into,
marked.
is the documents still legal documents?
Yeah.
Like this